Today, we have with us Professor Vijaya Bhasker Marisetty, Professor in Finance and FinTech, University of Twente, Netherlands, and University of Hyderabad. He is currently part of the Financial Engineering Group at the University of Twente, Netherlands. He has published several research studies in international journals including World Bank Economic Review, Journal of Banking and Finance, Journal of Financial Market, Auditing, Journal of Practice and Theory, International Review of Finance and Energy Economics. He received Best Research Paper awards from several conferences and journals and competitive research grants from the Ministry of Education, Government of India, Synchrony IT, Reserve Bank of India, New York University, National Stock Exchange, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. He acted as a consultant for United Nations and World Bank projects connected to rural empowerment in India. He mentored several startups in the fintech area. He is currently running several initiatives for empowering Indian farmers, women, and people at the bottom of pyramid under the Inclusive Growth Chain Initiative. This initiative provides blockchain, machine learning, and AI-powered technological interventions to bring more democratic distribution of wealth in Indian agriculture ecosystem. So, without further ado, I wholeheartedly welcome Professor Vijaya Bhasker Marisetty for the inauguration of the conference and for the keynote speech. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Surya. And I'd like to thank the conference organizers, specifically Professor Biju for inviting me to give a keynote in the conference. And thanks to Professor Gabriel for giving an excellent presidential address at the beginning. You have to excuse me, my throat is not really 100% today. So it's a great honor for me to be part of this conference, and this conference is very timely. So I think we need to know more about behavioral nudges and how they're going to help us, or are there any issues with them? We have to discuss more on this. So if you ask me what made me to be the keynote for this conference, when I received an email from Professor Biju to be the keynote, the thing attracted me is Kerala. Nothing more than that, nothing less than that. Have some kind of anchoring effect, in behavioral science terminology, where I have beautiful memories of Kerala. So when I went, I mainly spent my holidays in Kerala, and I have a very, very positive image of Kerala. And I think, in fact, it was not an economic decision to be part of this conference. So this conference doesn't do me any economic gain. I don't know much about reputation that it would lead to, but it was a behavioral nudge that really made me to become part of this conference. So it was instantaneous. I replied him back saying that I'm happy to be part of the conference. And it's a very rational decision from economics point of view, right? So, but it happens. I think it happens every day in our lives, and this is very important. And that's how the whole world works. No matter how unsystematic, how many single point of failures we have in life, the system as a whole keeps working. Could be due to a lot of behavioral nudges in the process. So I think that's the backdrop of why I'm here, and I'm happy to be here, and happy to give my keynote. Let me share my... So the title of my keynote today is on behavioral nudges for better public policy in India. So I'm for behavioral nudges in this speech. So here you see this beautiful image taken from the Science Journal article published in 2007. This is one of the first papers that gave a solid neural basis for the prospect theory, that I think our behavior for losses and gains is not exactly the same. We derive different types of utility for losses compared to the gains. And different parts of the brain gets activated based on whether it's a loss or a gain. These kind of research works have led to the foundations of what we call now as the behavioral nudges. where now we can establish a strong linkage between economics, psychology, and medicine. So this makes this discipline much more serious than what we used to have before 2007. Like this is a very path-breaking work that clearly showed that there is a physiological basis for our behavior, and most of the times our behavior is not as per the books in economics. So it's something quite different from what we normally read in economics discipline. I'll start with a public policy issue which is relevant right now. So this is about COVID vaccination resistance. You might be seeing this across the globe, not just in India, in Netherlands too. I think there are a lot of protests that people are against vaccination. A set of people, a strong group who are against vaccination. Same in Australia, same in the US, same in India too. I think there are a lot of people who do not want to get vaccinated. Now, how, as a public policy maker, you want to deal with this? You see these two images here with newspaper articles. On the left-hand side, there's one government that is trying to penalize people who do not want to get vaccinated. On the right-hand side, there is another government who is taking an alternative approach, giving more education, bringing more awareness to people on how, what are the bad effects or ill effects of not getting vaccinated. Right. So you see that broadly, public policy takes these two forms. Either you punish or you educate. You pick any country in the world, that's how we deal with public policy. Like in finance, for example, a classic example, you see in financial services, say mutual fund industry. So there was a policy by SEBI asking all mutual funds to disengage with brokers who market or who market or to sell the mutual fund products. In other words, to ban the commissions paid to these brokers. That's penalizing act. On the other hand, they had to go back and then repeal that after a few years because that led to almost drying off inflows into the mutual funds. So they came back and said that they amended the law, and they said that no, he can charge commissions, but at the same time, mutual funds have to provide more education to the investors in terms of grading the products. In terms of coming out with more informative mechanisms on how people can learn more about mutual funds and take risk accordingly. Right. So you see that even in this whatever public policy decision, it was either to educate or to penalize. So you pick any other regulation, you see these two as the broad elements of public policy. Now, you look at this other two countries. On the left-hand side, you have Singapore, and on the right-hand side, you have Ivory Coast. Again, these two countries are trying to address the vaccination problem. Right? So not being vaccinated is an issue. Now, Singapore takes a different route. It tries to educate in a different way. So it's educating not about vaccination. It's educating about misinformation on vaccination. So it's using a route that was not used, a direct route that was used by other countries. But you take Ivory Coast. So Ivory Coast is a soccer crazy country. So what they are doing is they're inviting the star soccer players and asking them to play a game and inviting all the Ivory Coast citizens to come and watch these games, either in a stadium or in front of big screens. And you try to motivate them to take vaccines by letting the soccer stars getting vaccinated, or they saying to their fans to get vaccinated. You see, this is a different route again altogether. So here, so they're using more, something more close to behavioral nudge, where they're using human behavior as an instrument or a medium through which they can communicate their public policy and trying to understand people, getting into their skin, being one of them, and trying to get their job done. You see that we have seen 4 cases. So in the previous slide, we have seen 2 cases. One is to punish, to educate, Singapore to modify, and Ivory Coast to influence. Right. So there are 4 cases and 4 different types. So you see that there are 2 extreme paths. One is go for direct education, or you go for punishment, or there are middle paths where you either modify what is there, or you try to influence by getting into their skin. So these middle paths are picking up more mileage in terms of public policy. Not only in terms of public policy, it's been validated by recent research. You look at this article published in Nature, which is one of the top journals. So Nature here says that behavioral nudges increase COVID-19 vaccinations. Right. So by using behavioral nudges, you can significantly increase the number of people getting vaccinated. And these authors ran this experiment in the US using randomized controlled trials. And they have a strong evidence to suggest that behavioral nudges do help in vaccination process. Right. So in other words, behavioral nudges work. They're important for public policy. Right. So this is the backdrop of my talk today. So behavioral nudges are important things, and they're gaining more importance in economics and other management disciplines, and they're here going to stay with us. And we're going to do more research on behavioral nudges and how they can benefit. Professor Biju was talking about the LPG case, which has been a great success, which is a kind of modifying the advertisement process rather directly saying that, well, I think you forego you are penalizing them, saying that if you have benefits, you have a certain economic level. If you still use LPG gas subsidy, then we're going to penalize you. I think rather using that as a strategy, government tried to modify the strategy in a very positive way. And I think that has yielded a good response from the public. So behavioral nudges are an important part of public policy. So just to summarize the backdrop here, so when we say a nudge, which is more about a gentle push, right? So we're trying to move things with a gentle push, not with a very huge push, right? So and governments, are mainly dealing all the public policy issues either by educating people or by punishing people. These direct methods are not really giving much desired effect for the change that we really want to see. So government mainly assumes, not only government, government is driven by all these thinkers. The think tank behind the government think that the people are rational, logical, and they take decisions with proper analysis and deduction. In reality, people think instinctively and act irrationally, right? So, like I told you at the beginning, my decision to join this conference was very instinctive. Some examples on how we can use a nudge technique compared to the existing method. For example, instructing a child to tidy his or her room. This is a common thing all mothers do at home. And you know that most of the kids do not care about it, but a nudge could be playing along with them as a room tidying game, right? So that works better, for example. And erecting signs saying no littering and warning if there is littering, you're going to pay a huge fine, which I think did not work that well. Especially in Hyderabad, littering is a big problem. And you see littering in front of the board that says, fines are levied if you litter. So rather, I think a better one would be improving the display of the bins and also making the bins available at the right places. So an example again is joining a gym versus a simple way is to use stairs. Counting calories versus using smaller plates. Weekly food shopping, budgeting versus using a small basket or a bag instead of a trolley, right? So these are some nudge techniques which are relatively gentle pushes for desired outcomes. So how do you design them? I think this talk is mainly about designing nudges. So how do we go about designing nudges? So as a researcher mainly, not as a public policy maker, but more as a researcher. So designing choices for people have to ensure that they should be encouraged, and they have to be positive, and they have to help them, right? So and you have to identify the right methodology on how you can shape or design your communication, design your strategy to ensure that a nudge becomes more effective, right? So you have to make from forcing decision methods to nudging methods, right? So which are relatively easier for people to embrace, rather confronting or getting provoked by the policy changes. So why we need to get to this level? Because if you go back to our researchers like Richard Taylor or Daniel Kahneman, so all these people try to separate economics from human activity. I think even Professor Biju this morning discussed on that. So human activity is relatively more automatic and less reflective. It's mainly uncontrolled compared to what we assume in economics as more controlled. And most of the times our activity or actions are effortless. Whereas in the case of economics, there is always a trade-off. So most of our actions have a trade-off, right? So for example, you pick another public policy, the way we decide or design on a public policy is what is the trade-off, what is the cost, and what is the benefit of having a given mechanism. Like for example, if you take COVID vaccination, what is the cost of punishing versus what is the cost of education, and what is the trade-off? If the cost of education is higher than the cost of punishing, then let's go with punishing mechanism. On the other hand, if the cost of the other way around, if the cost of education is less expensive compared to the cost of punishment, then go with education. And that's how rationally we take decisions in economics. We use some kind of a trade-off mechanism, right? So for example, a classical one from my own research work that I worked in finance is why the stock exchanges impose price limits. Some stock exchanges impose price limits. Some stock exchanges do not impose any price limits. Why they should be price limits? Then, so that now I try to develop a strong, very convincing economic theory using game theory, saying that if the monitoring costs are too high, then it's better off for the regulator to impose certain restrictive practices like limits, which are not good for the welfare, but the cost of monitoring is too high. So they can't impose, they can't spend that kind of money for monitoring. So they're better off having carpet rules. You see that in many policy decisions, you have a lot of carpet rules. Sometimes there doesn't work, but they might be suboptimal sometimes. But for economists, as per their trade-off, that's a better decision in terms of costs and benefits, right? So in other words, your decision is based on a very deductive approach, and it has an effort put into it, and it's relatively slow, and you're aware of a lot of variables that would affect, and I think you follow a set of rules based on that. Whereas most of the human actions, are relatively uncontrolled, effortless, associative. So we always take decisions in the context of what we already know. For example, I take the example of COVID again. Now we are going for this COVID drive for kids in the sense high school kids between 16 to 18 years old. My daughter had to go for a vaccination sometime back a month ago. And one of her classmates in the school, got vaccinated, and she died. Now, so this is an associative behavior that we normally have, given that one of the classmates died because of COVID vaccination. That will have a huge impact on the other parents who go to the same school. And they may not be interested to have their kid gets vaccinated purely because the way they look at vaccination is based on the information set they have got. All right, so that's an issue in public policy. How do you deal with that? And you see this kind of stigmas everywhere in the society because of societal norms. You don't want to do certain things. For example, some religious beliefs will prohibit you to take vaccination. Right, so that's an associative behavior we tend to have, and most of the time our behaviors are relatively fast, unconscious, and skilled in the sense that based on what experiences we have got in the past, we develop our own skill set on how to take these decisions. And like if you look at Kahneman, I think he classifies our thinking into mainly system 1 and system 2 thinking processes, where system 1 is more about human way of thinking, and system 2 is more like economic way of thinking. And in many cases, Daniel proposes that system 1 thinking, surprisingly, is much more superior compared to system 2. So there is a merit on trying to understand more about human behavior. So why nudges are becoming more prominent and important now? Like we're having a conference here right now, because I think the way societies are being organized is becoming much more complex. Much more large, where a given public policy has a huge impact. Given the scale of impact, you want to ensure that the policy decisions you make are much more useful for the society and much more effective. Right. So hence, we need to take nudges more seriously now. Before I venture into what I have done with my research colleagues in this area, I just want to give a backdrop on heuristics to understand, how we think and what are the fallacies of our own thinking processes, and how can we provide nudge as a solution for those. Like, for example, anchoring effect. I was talking about my daughter's school case. Like most of the parents would get anchored to what they know, their information sets based on their existing associative connections, right? So, and this could influence the way they react to a public policy. So if you're a public policy maker, the nudges you need to look at to solve this kind of problem is you need to give much more factual comparisons. So you need to publicize statistics more. You need to ensure that people can reduce their bias with the better information set, right? So for example, Singapore government's effort in COVID vaccination problem is mainly trying to provide a solution because there is a lot of misinformation about vaccinations. So there has been a huge anchoring effort, which is the case in India too. But Singapore government decided that they can tackle that with a nudge by giving more information, educating people on misinformation, not by talking, but giving facts so that people can compare and contrast. A related one to that is representativeness, how people try to have their own representations, stereotypes. And this can have a huge effect on whether a public policy can be successful or not, right? So these are very common. in our daily lives. I think we have so many stereotypes that exist in our societies. So again, a nudge has to understand that people do have stereotypes, and you need to get to the core or the root of the problem and try to dispel the false stereotypes or the wrong assumptions. And likewise, you have optimism as another heuristic, or overconfidence. So that leads to a lot of denial. People do not accept because they think that they have better understanding of a given phenomena, especially people who are highly skilled, like doctors, fund managers. They tend to have more overconfidence on what they do, and that will have huge effect on public welfare, right? If they have very strong beliefs due to their optimism or overconfidence, right? So then a nudge has to again tackle these kind of issues with better clarity and allowing more flexibility, right? So providing more feedback on their decisions, etc. And loss aversion is one of the most common heuristics that we all have. We tend to take our losses more seriously, right? And this gets cashed by a lot of marketing companies through nudges, right? So these are some of the side effects of nudges, where people try to cash in on our behavior. The challenges, associated with those when you use nudge theory. This is to the advantage of the companies who would like to profit from our weaknesses, right? That's something we have to keep in mind. And the other heuristics that are important to consider are framing. How do you frame an issue? Right. So here you see an example. You want to promote healthy food. You can either say 20% fat on the label or 80% fat-free. Both are same, but the way you label can create a better nudge. And hence, I think the consumption patterns vary based on how you frame things, because people have their own set of frames, and you have to map those frames to what you want to communicate. Mindlessness, I think, this is again a huge issue, very rational issue we come across. People have a lot of complacency, poor concentration, negligence, and these are increasing day by day, especially with the gadgets in our hands. So we are paying limited attention to a lot of things, so we don't look at the details. Hence, I think we have to address this issue too. I think most of the times we don't care what the content is. We just agree when we download apps on our mobile phones. No one reads, all the terms and conditions of a given mobile app, for example. And this is not just mobile apps. Even in stock trading, there are so many stocks, thousands of stocks that are listed in the stock exchange. We can't really focus on all of them. So we come out with our own set of stocks, with our own biases, and we try to trade with our own limited attention, right? So, and this can be a huge issue in terms of introducing public policies. Likewise, conforming. Conforming is, you try to follow the herd. So you don't want to be the odd man out in the crowd, right? So that's an issue again, especially if you want to try to remove some stigmas in the society, some stereotypes in the society. If conforming behavior exists in the society, then I think public policy is very difficult to implement. Right. So because people do face embarrassment, due to lack of confidence, for example. And so this is also called as the mob effect. Connected to that is spotlight effect. Sometimes you don't want to be in the spotlight, especially you look at these rape victims cases, they don't want to be in the spotlight. Then how can you ensure that they become better, for example? Right. So how can we build confidence in them? Right. So through a public policy or through campaigns. right? So how we can communicate with them. All these areas need nudges. Now, this is the backdrop of my talk. So we have a fair bit of understanding what behavioral nudges are and whether they're important or not, and how to design nudges based on our own heuristics in the backdrop. Now, the second part of my talk is, as a researcher, how can we design behavioral nudges, so that we can guide the public policymakers. One methodology that I'm going to delve, given the limited time we have here, is discrete choice experiments. Discrete choice experiments you might have seen, or you might have come across, some of you, is one of the methods where you try to understand people more clearly. So no matter what kind of heuristics they come with, you want to understand them. You want to understand their willingness to be part of, say, a given change or an outcome. So I'm going to discuss about a discrete choice experiments and how to design nudges through discrete choice experiments. Right. So discrete choice, as it says, it's about a choice experiment which is discrete. In other words, you give a choice to people to select one of the two alternatives. And you do this with many people and randomly. Every time you keep on changing the choices, and you gather as many choice sets as possible, and you analyze all these choice sets using some econometric methodology, and based on that, you derive what people want. And this is, in a nutshell, what discrete choice experiment is all about. So here we need to know what people want in a choice environment. Policies, contracts generally are multidimensional, and they have so many combinations of desirable and undesirable outcomes, right? So, and some people want, even though they're undesirable, and you want to know why they want them. So making them optimal requires you need valuation, like how much people value each choice, each dimension, and how do people do their own mental trade-offs. Right. So it is based on stated preference approach, not based on pre-specifying what people or revealed preferences approach. Right. So most of the models we have are based on, like, we conduct a survey and we get the revealed preferences, and based on the preferences we try to design things. That's a normal approach. But stated preference is trying to understand the latent behavior of people. So they state their own choices mainly here, and based on the choices, you try to derive what people want. And why we need to have a choice experiment in our own setting. This is a ongoing work with one of my PhD students, Shreyansh Nema, at the University of Hyderabad. We have been working with a large set of farmers in rural Tamil Nadu, and we've been running a lot of experiments over the last 2 years. So the first question that we ask in our research experiments is how do we make sure farmers aggregate their demand? So when we say their demand, it could be for inputs, it could be for access to finance, it could be for any other reason. The reason why they have to aggregate demand in India is that most of the Indian farmers are marginal farmers. So they have an average acreage of 1 to 1.5 acres. And their annual income is quite low. It's around 50 to 60,000 rupees per annum. And so given this backdrop, you see that they have very less bargaining power. And given this backdrop, their contribution to GDP is very less compared to, say, a software employee or software industry contribution to GDP. Although farming community is the largest labor resource we have in India, right? So lower productivity, lower land holdings, poverty trap, are mainly connected to the lack of aggregation. So how can we make them to aggregate things? So government tried in terms of public policy a few times. So when we got independence, the government encouraged people to form cooperatives. So cooperative is a method of aggregation. So it worked in some cases. In majority of the cases, it didn't work. So as a public policy, cooperatives right now has failed on average in India. Now, so how can we, and again, so cooperative is not something what people wanted to have. Cooperative is what the government thought as the best solution because it worked in other jurisdictions, right? So now you want to empower farmers. So government has got few approaches: educate them, and wait passively and hope for the best, or regulate. So you can say farmers, hey, you aggregate together, or I'm going to penalize you. Rather, if you're using a nudge, then you ask them. You try to know what exactly you want. Yeah, if you want to aggregate, what do you think are the gains of aggregation? Right. So you don't ask them all these questions directly, but you run experiments to get to know what exactly you want to know in terms of what people want and what they don't want for aggregating more effectively. So that's the middle part. So, and this is the path we are taking in this research work, and we're trying to understand what farmers want in terms of if they have to aggregate. So these are the farmers. Most of them are women farmers, and we've been working with them for quite some time now. So first thing is we have to define attributes. Attributes are the dimensions of value. So aggregation has got some benefits, and you try to classify what are the major attributes of aggregation process. Right. So, and these are taken mainly from experts' opinions, literature, etc. And we should not have many attributes. We have to consolidate all the attributes into the major segments. In this case, we came out with 10 attributes, and this reduces the cognitive burden on the respondents or the participants in this case. So then attributes and their corresponding levels are randomized into different choice sets. So you have many permutations and combinations of choices. Now, once you have so many choices, you want to again, reduce a huge choice set into meaningful choice sets. We do some econometric models to come out with 16 major choices that people can make for aggregation. For this experiment, we had around close to 1,000 participants, around 30 villages in Madurai and Virudhunagar districts of Tamil Nadu. And participation is purely voluntary. And all questions were translated in their own language. Respondents were asked to choose their most preferred aggregation design. Again, these are all randomized. So it was stressed that they consider all the attributes before indicating their choice. Right. So they have to look for all the attributes in a given choice set. Right. So, and we also have supplementary questionnaires to get their demographics, and we also ran some lab experiments to understand their behavior. Like for example, to understand the heuristics of the farming communities, we ran 4 major experiments to understand their risk aversion levels, their level of honesty, and their value for trust and trustworthiness, and their willingness to contribute for a common pool of resources. And these are standard behavioral experiments in a lab setting where you actually run the experiments using cash. Like for example, coin toss game is used for risk aversion, where each respondent is given 50 rupees, and so they have a choice either to toss the coin in case if there is a head, then the outcome would be 3 times. If there is a tail, then I think they lose everything. So you try to have this kind of asymmetric reward functions, and you try to see how they respond to the loss versus gain before running the game, or tossing the coin in this case, right? So that likewise you devise more experiments to understand the heuristics of the farmers. This is a typical choice set. You see the cost of borrowing, input costs, membership fee, decision-making autonomy, access to market information, finances, access to finance in tranches or as a bullet pool, revenue, when do they want, immediately or post-storage, hiring equipment facility, loan without any collateral, commissions paid to the middlemen, transport expenses, etc. So all these attributes you see are connected to aggregation. Like for example, if you aggregate, your cost of borrowing is going to come down. Your input costs are going to come down. Still, you have to pay a membership fee if you're part of an aggregate entity. Your decision-making autonomy is going to come down. Access to market information is going to increase. Financing can be arranged in tranches. Revenue can come post storage, because aggregation lets you to have a warehouse facility and you can get a better price. So you can hire equipment and you can take loans without any collateral, because as an aggregate entity, you can give collective guarantee and you don't incur any commission costs. So there are some benefits and there are some costs of aggregation. So you pose questions, some answers. One choice can be rational, the other choice can be irrational. People have the liberty to pick the choice they want. So you are trying to capture their rationality and also irrationality through this choice set experiment. So once you have all these choice sets from all the respondents, then you construct a conditional logic model to establish some causal relationships. And based on the covariates, you can as well calculate how much they're willing to pay for each of these attributes through aggregation. And the major findings in our experiment is that farmers value aggregation. And how much they value the aggregation? It's about 32.2% of the cost of borrowing. So for example, if the cost of borrowing is 10%, 3.2% of the cost of borrowing, so for the total cost of borrowing, is what they're willing to pay. So in other words, a 3.2% interest rate they're willing to pay if someone can help them to aggregate their demand or aggregate their supply. So which is quite valuable. And farmers consider commissions and transport as the most important attributes. In other words, if you want to use a behavioral nudge here to encourage people to come and aggregate, then I think you have to focus your communication strategy mainly on eliminating commissions and transport expenses as one of the major elements of aggregation. And willingness to pay for aggregation is higher among the members who are already part of an aggregation process, like an FPO. FPO is a farmer producing organization. So if they're part of an aggregation process, they are more willing to pay for aggregation. So you have to use this kind of people as behavioral nudges to encourage other people to come and join. And the other one is willingness to pay for aggregation is a J-shaped curve, in the sense that aggregation is high initially. The willingness to join as members is high, and they're willing to pay more to become part of an aggregation process. But it slows down. But again, it goes up after 2 years of being part of an aggregation process. So in other words, once they reap the benefits, they think that they're more willing to pay for aggregation service. In other words, unless people have experience of aggregation, you can't really go and push them to become part of an aggregate entity. So as a behavioral nudge, you can encourage people to become members free of cost as a public policy, then let them experience it. Then later you charge them some fee to become part of an entity. So that could be one way to address this issue. So likewise, we have several other findings. What derives negative utility for farmers, and what derives value for farming communities. Too, I think women. This is well known. I think more risk averse compared to men. Women have lower trust levels compared to men in our experiments. So hence, the way you need to deal with women members is quite different in aggregation compared to men. FPO members have lower trust levels compared to non-members. So again, that's one of the key for better communication. Willingness to take risk and trust levels increase after joining an FPO. So joining itself is a hurdle most of the time. So willingness to pay for aggregation is highest among the respondents with moderate risk aversion, right? So people with moderate risk aversion are the most interested people to become part of an aggregation process. Respondents who are dishonest, willing to contribute to a common pool. So that's a very intriguing finding, I think. So they, people who are dishonest are more interested to contribute to a common pool, right? So, and having low trust levels and a higher trustworthiness, they are more willing to pay for aggregation service. So these are our findings, and the objective of this experiment is to understand and help public policymakers on how to design nudges if they really want farmers to aggregate and contribute more for GDP by increasing their income levels through higher bargaining power. Right. So with this, I think I have come to the end of my keynote. Just to summarize the discussion until now, behavioral nudges are important. And there is scientific proof now that economics should take psychology more seriously, and economic theory has to drastically revised to ensure that it becomes more realistic, which is not easy. It's quite challenging. And behavioral nudges are working in many settings in the world, and so we have to have clarity on the heuristics on people psychology as a policymaker. Then we have to have a strategy on how to design better and effective nudges, right? Okay, thank you. I'm just closing this presentation here.
Thank you, Vijay sir. Now the session is open for discussion, and participants having doubts regarding the session can unmute yourself and ask. Now,
With myself, I'm Aparna, doing PhD in Department of Commerce under Vijaya sir. Sir, it was a very informative session, and I have a doubt. You have mentioned about that there are two systems of thinking. System one, that is automatic, and the system two is reflective. And initially, the behavioral nudges are designed based upon the automatic system of thinking, like default reminders. But in nowadays, the popular nudges are designed from the system two thinking. Is this contradict our theoretical understanding about the nudging theory? That's my doubt.
Yeah, so I don't know whether I can give the right answer, because I didn't come across system 2 based nudges in my own research literature search. So in theory, system 2 is an idealistic world. So you don't need a nudge if everyone is like system 2 person.
Sir, if we are educating, or information can be used as a nudge, then it can be said as a system two nudge. That we are prompting the people to think rationally in order to get a desired behavior.
Right.
Nowadays, the nudges are, I don't know whether it can be said as a nudge or.
I got the question now. I have more clarity on the question. So you're saying that you're trying to convert system 1 thinkers into system 2 thinkers.
Yes,
That's so is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's the question you have, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, system 2 is definitely an ideal world. I think we really want everyone to be system 2. Then I think your public policy cost is 0, right? So we want that. But I think, we are not. So we have to appreciate that we are not. And I think whatever merits we have as system 1 thinkers, we still have. But I think for public policy, it's a collective wisdom kind of a thing. So individually, I think it might work for us by being system 1 thinker, but collectively, it may not work. Collectively, we need some kind of normative, idealistic world. So in that case, we still want a public policy to be more like system 2.
So people won't accept they are irrational. They
Yeah.
always like to say that they are rational. So in
True.
order to convince them, we have to design system 2 nudges.
Yeah, people are they have a denial that they are irrational. That is true. That's where I think education, the way you educate people through nudges, should be not direct education,
Okay.
right?
We
It
are
has
adopting nudges to educate them.
yeah. So you have to include nudges as part of education. So you have to modify your educational practices. Like, for example, Ivory Coast is a good example of COVID. So people are being educated that not being vaccinated is not good for the whole society. Whether you are immune or not immune, as a society, we can collapse. Then I think so. If you tell that, I think no one really listens to you. So in that case, you have to use a nudge where you invite everyone to see what you really want to see, and you become part of them. And you ask the soccer stars to be the influencers, and I think get the job done. So ultimately, you want a job which is about public welfare, which is more like system 2 world. Right, so you want that to happen, but people have their own heuristics, as you said, and people may not like it. So you want to understand what they really like. So you have to spend more time to understand what people like.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
May I intervene? Vijay, sir?
Sure. Sure.
So, Vijay, sir, thank you. Thank you for the session. Thank you, Vijay, sir, for this conference. My name is Tanu, and I am presently doing
Hi.
my research at Vijay Terence, sir, who is
Uh-huh.
in the University of Kerala Department of Commerce.
Uh-huh.
My topic is behavioral economic perspectives of fishermen households in Kerala.
Oh,
Sir,
wow.
I'm so happy that you have shared a lot of insights, which would come across in my topic actually. So I am so glad to ask you certain clarifications. You
Right.
mentioned like religion has got a significant role in COVID
Yeah.
vaccination
Yeah.
campaigns. You mentioned it.
Right.
So, have you done any studies regarding this religious ethos, religious cultural norms making significant effects on the local community behaviors in India, elsewhere? Have you done any studies, and what is your insight on that particular religious cultural background
Right.
playing significant role in
Yeah.
behavioral factors?
Yeah, I did not do anything in particular, but I know the literature, and a lot of people have done. There's one widely accepted literature is on Islamic finance, for example,
Yes.
where I think religious beliefs would drive how people make choices in terms of investing, not based on 100% rational choices. But religion can drive your investment choice, and accordingly, there is a huge industry built trying to understand people better. And Islamic
Yes.
finance is a $1 trillion industry right now, because we try to accommodate what people want there. So that's a very good example.
Yes. You have mentioned about the designs also, choice
Yeah,
architecture design,
yeah,
and you have the sample choice set
yeah.
as part of your research also.
Right.
So my question is, you have rightly mentioned right below the attributes, which
Right.
aggregate design would you prefer A or prefer B
Right.
in terms of the attributes in aggregation? Means you have mentioned 10 attributes,
Right.
and you are asking the farmers to select attribute A or attribute B, or
Right.
you are asking them to select one each attribute. What was the design you made?
Aggregate there. So choice set A.
An attribute stretch, and you are asking them to select a particular aggregate.
Exactly. But see, what happens is for each farmer, these attributes keep on changing randomly.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah, that is a question. Then if one is selecting attribute A
right.
in aggregation A and another attribute in B pool, so how would you calculate, and how is the um,
Yeah.
progress?
So I think you have ultimately for 1,000 farmers, I don't know the exact numbers, you'll have something like 30,000 choice sets. So I think I don't know the exact number. I need to go back and check it. So you have thousands of choice sets for 1,000 members. So if you have so many choices, each time each one is a randomized, like in our trial, where attributes keep changing. So you would have covered at attribute level, although you ask aggregate. In such a large choice sets, large population or a sample of choice sets. Right. I think I strongly recommend with your fishermen you do some kind of discrete choice experiments.
Discrete choices experiment. I'm so taken up by that discrete choices experiments. And my thinking is like I'm doing my literature review and
Right.
talks with experts, and almost I'm in the process of designing my tools. So that's what I have asked you about this, how you made up this attributes and aggregation model. That was my questions. Thank you. I would contact you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very
So I
much.
think I'm happy to come to Kerala beaches and spend some time with the fishermen.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
We will invite you.
Sir, can I ask?
Yes.
I'm Ananda Ratnanaban. My question is, can you rigidly say that nudges are ethical?
That's a good question. Well, not really. I think some nudges are not ethical at all, especially nudges used by marketing people.
Okay. So I have a question more, sir. If the respondents are aware about the fact that they are being nudged, would their response would be different?
See, if you believe that people are system one thinkers, then even if they are aware, the decisions what they take are instinctive. So it doesn't matter.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, morning.
Thank you so much for the nice presentation.
Thank you.
I am Dr. Minarul Islam Biswas. I have my PhD from the Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia, completed last year.
Yeah.
Sir, while you are explaining that which policy government should go for, so you have given the example of COVID vaccination,
right?
And you have mentioned two options, for example, educating people and punishing people,
right?
And you have mentioned that the option which involves less cost, the government should go for that.
No, that's how the government thinks. No, I did not recommend that. But any economic theory or economists would think like that.
But sir, then if the option which involves less cost, if it is not that effective as compared to the other option which is more effective, then it's like a dilemma. The option is involving less cost, but it is not that effective compared to the other one. So in that context, which rationally government should go for? Which one you will recommend?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you can have an option that is less a trade-off. Net cost is less for the government, and government would like to implement that. Eventually, that may become very ineffective. Hence, I think neither the options are good. See, the current research is saying that you should not go for these kind of options at all. You should not go for an option that is direct. Education and punishment, both are direct. So rather you go for nudges. In other words, you change your education practice, you change the way you communicate, or you twist things in such a way that you understand people better before you communicate. So in other words, you should not go for both options. There should be some kind of a middle path.
Okay, sir. And sir, in relation to the previous question, the participant has asked that many of the nudges may not be ethical. Then if the nudges are not ethical, then whether it is desirable to institutionalize it or theorize it, as you are talking about behavioral nudges, when it is not ethical, then how should whether it is desirable or not to go for institutionalizing it or theorizing it? That is my question, sir.
I think if it is not ethical, I think we should not. But there are a lot of nudges which has no connection with ethics. So, for example, inviting people for a common good, like inviting all these people for watching soccer matches and in turn getting vaccinated, has got nothing to do with ethics. But trying to sell a product using a nudge because we have some biases, then I think that is an issue. So you should know definitely the ethics behind, which is very important to know, the ethics behind nudges, and you have to ensure that the nudges for public policy should not have any ethical clashes.
Thank you so much, sir.
There are some questions in the chat box. Can you read it out? Yeah, Jansi ma'am, you please proceed.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Morning,
it was
madam.
a wonderful presentation. Yeah,
Thank you.
excuse me for not asking anything related with public policy and all. I just want to know how far you can apply this behavioral science or nudging theory in particular in finance. That is, can you suggest some topics or some areas in, or especially some specialized areas in finance where this behavioral science can be applied?
Yeah, I think all the emerging areas of finance have a behavioral science element in it. Especially, I think running experiments includes a lot of behavioral, background. Some areas, I think fintech, for example, fintech is a big area. Like you take the emerging issues right now, loan apps. I don't know whether you know, the loan apps is a big problem in India. A lot of loan apps are making people, rather having better access to finance, they're making them to become more into the poverty trap. I don't know whether you came across that. That's a huge public policy issue right now in terms of whether we should ban loan apps or we should let them stay. If you totally ban the loan apps, then I think there is a problem that people will not have access to finance, especially people who do not have a proper access, like people at the bottom of the pyramid. A loan app will help them to get access. But I think having access to a loan app and the loan apps exploit them because of our own heuristics, biases, then I think that is not a good thing. And most of them are doing it right now. For example, a lot of loan apps get into public shame. In case if you do not pay your repayments on time, you undergo public shame, and there are a lot of cases where people committed suicide because of this issue. So now, how do you address those concerns? So that's a big behavioral debate in terms of how to devise loan apps to ensure that you can ask people to repay through behavioral nudges, but at the same time not causing public shame. Because public shame, putting them on the spotlight, is, as we have seen, one of the heuristics that can have severe adverse impact. Likewise, crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is another issue where I think what kind of projects needs to be funded, how the crowdfunding or the inventors should use behavioral nudges to ensure that they can raise finances for their right causes, for example. So you pick any area which is emerging in finance, there is a behavioral element.
Thank you for your reply, sir. One more question shall I ask you?
Please.
Like,
Yeah.
sir, often this observation method, no?
Yeah.
To me, that is a very difficult process. It seems to be a very difficult process. Like you need to have a real-time setting and all. So how do you go for that? Can you usually we don't resort to all these observation methods, no, sir? So as a researcher, can you explain how that is practical and feasible in our studies?
Yeah, I think, it goes back to the comment made by your colleague, Professor Biju. I think, he said that this behavioral nudge research is more in the Western world compared to India and China. One of the reasons is, I think, it's very expensive to run these experiments. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources, very challenging. Like, for example, the experiment we are running in Tamil Nadu, that costs a lot of money. So we need a huge grant to support those kind of projects. So which is still an issue, but now with technology, the way you run experiments is changing. For example, we reduced a significant amount of the cost by using apps for surveys. So where I think the app can have something like a robot advisor, which can ask questions. This could be the way we have to go forward, how to use technology to reduce the cost of running experiments. But right now, that is a limitation. Most of these studies need a lot of resources.
So last one question we can take, sir, one in chat box.
Yeah.
System 1 is like we are slaves, and system 2 we are masters.
Oh.
And so we will that's 98% of our thinking is based on system 1, and nudges are designed based on system 1, and system 2, system 1 dominates, isn't it? That's the question.
So the last sentence is what? System 1?
Yeah, this 98% of the thinking is based on system 1.
1, yes, yeah.
And nudges are designed based on system 1.
Right.
Our system 2 is that the system 1 dominate. This question
I think,
raised by Stalin.
Yeah, I think that is right, that a majority of the thinking is system 1. But when we develop a policy, then I think we don't use system 1. We try to use system 2 always for policy making. We try to come out of system 1 and make the policy. And that's where I think the whole divergence happens, because we are not really system 2 thinkers. And but we use system 2 as an approach for public policy. Whereas we are all system 1 thinkers. But I think when we make policy, definitely the policy is always. I think researchers have to bridge the gap mainly, so that I think system 1 thinkers can collectively take decisions which are desirable as per system 2. It's not like system 2 is a bad thing. It is just that we are not system.
So can we conclude, sir? Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more to say? You can say that. Otherwise, we can conclude.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks everyone. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Simon sir. Anything to be added? So you are muted.
Thank you for the wonderful session. Part of it,
my pleasure.
I was a bit for maybe 15 minutes or so. I could not be with you online, but wonderful inputs. So thank you so much on behalf of University of Kerala. Hopefully we interact in future as well. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Vijaya Bhasker, sir. We have got methodological insights also. So you have practical experiments on these nudge experiments with farmers. And we have got many academic insights on this impact of heuristics, behavioral science, and system 1 and system 2. There was discussions, there was questions by Aparna, Dr. Jansi Teresa, and Father Sanu Francis. So thank you all. Thank you, Vijaya Bhasker, sir, for the wonderful, excellent academic exercise here. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Sir. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you all participants for this session. So thanks.